Kazakhstan shares with Kyrgyzstan the Central Asian distinction of being quote-unquote partly free, as opposed to not free at all, like much of the rest of the others in Central Asia. Kazakhstan has moved in a very different direction from both Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, though. Unlike Kyrgyzstan, it's been ruled by one leader, aka Nazarbayev, since before independence. Unlike Uzbekistan, though, it's allowed some degree of freedoms in the country, freedoms that Nazarbayev felt he could afford. In other words, enough freedom to claim to be at least an illiberal democracy and not an all-out hardcore authoritarian leader, without actually risking giving up power. And this has been in part thanks to oil and the high prices for that commodity that we've had over the last decade and a half. So Kazakhstan is really the politics of an oil economy. So you've got a slightly greater degree of freedom, but you also have problems with this. Here I mentioned the oil worker protests. In 2011, there were several months of strikes by oil workers that were ended when police opened fire, killing dozens, injuring many more. The strikers, though, what were they up to? They were angry about working conditions and the disparity in pay between themselves and ethnic Chinese visiting workers. In a more formal reaction to this, very recently, Parliament in 2014 proposed a new law that could make illegal strikes, quote unquote, carry a sentence of $10,000, a $10,000 fine, or up to 3 years in jail. This shows just how much the oil industry means to Nazarbayev's power base. Many people talked about a quote-unquote color revolution when the oil worker protests were going on. And I think Nazarbayev must have been conscious of that as well. But oil money has meant that people are actually doing better in Kazakhstan, much better than anywhere else in Central Asia. The income per capita is about $13,000. Over the last year, or I should say over the last year up until, I should say, over the year leading up to 2012, the share of the population living in poverty went down from 5.5% in 2011 to 3.8% in 2012. Again, compare that to about 37% in Kyrgyzstan in that same period. This is a significant improvement, especially when you think that 47% were officially registered as impoverished in 2001. So over a decade, they literally slashed it from 47% to around 3 or 4%. The problem with Kazakhstan is that unless it diversifies its economy and gets off just being stuck on oil, this may not last forever. Throughout this, Nazarbayev has been sure to maintain ultimate control. So at the end of the day, he's able to manipulate whatever results he needs, get rid of opposition where he needs to in order to maintain power. So it's not just about being popular thanks to high oil prices, although this has helped a lot. In the 2012 parliamentary elections, Nazarbayev continued to pull from the Soviet playbook. He deregistered parties, he deregistered candidates at the last minute, and he also put at least one prominent oppositionist on trial for leading those oil strikes that I mentioned before. Again, the oil strikes being reminiscent of a potential revolution, or an ingredient to revolution. All this has led to condemnations from the OSCE, which is actually an organization that Kazakhstan had just recently headed. Nazarbayev, though, continues to take the standard Central Asian line that, quote, in his words, every step of our political reforms is closely tied to our level of economic development, i.e. we're following, and this isn't a quote, the Asian path. So this is the way Kazakhstan has interpreted its new sort of goals and the new direction it's going. Ooh, that was really short, but I'm going to take it to Turkmenistan in a different set of slides.